Welcome back to PLMin10, everything you want to know about SAP PLM 10 minutes at a time. Today we're going to be talking about compliance checking in SAP Recipe Development and how PLM can not only get you to market faster, but it can make your product development process smarter and more informed. Companies traditionally look at product compliance as a release point activity. While it still is, the more knowledge you can drive to the front end of innovation, the more likely you'll have successful products with market viability. For instance, as companies look for competitive advantage through diversification and localization, it's critical to know what can be sold into a specific market. For the food industry, swiftly responding to consumer demands like gluten-free, GMO, or other dietary expectations is in the end a compliance issue. These are checks that need to validate all throughout the design process, really digging deep into the product composition. Moreover, product transparency is gaining significant momentum. It can be driven by regulatory bodies like the FDA or suppliers, or just for brand to be upfront with customers. Subsequently, product developers are being asked to do a lot more than they ever did before. So to get to market faster, companies start with consolidating product data, which SAP Recipe Development does, but then to be smarter, they need to provide tools and rules to automate checks against that data and against a regulatory landscape that is in continuous change across global markets and supply chains. So in this episode, I'm going to briefly demonstrate how this can be achieved with SAP Recipe Development compliance check functionality powered by the 3E Ariel Content Delivery Cloud. Okay, so here we are in Recipe Development, and I'm going to navigate from the Work Overview screen into Recipes. And from my recently changed recipes, I'm going to select a recipe for flavored gummies, candy. And here's a recipe up top. You can see the recipe number, the description, flavored gummies, and our status in work. Moving over to the formula, which is a simple one, you can see the list of specifications. The first line, flavored gummies, is the primary output specification, which is what we're making. Subsequent specs are the inputs or ingredients. You can see the materials that are associated with the specs, the descriptions, quantities which automatically total. And on the end, you see check, which means recipe exists, which means this gummy premix is itself a nested recipe in the system. When we move over to the calculation results, you'll notice that the recipe is broken down into its constituent ingredients. The nested recipe gummy premix is no longer there. It is exploded and combined with the other ingredients. This ingredient list now drives system analysis like nutrients, dietary allergens, costs, and so on. Now, when we move over into the composition, you can see it breaks the recipe down even further to its lowest level constituents, down to the CAS number in this instance, showing the quantity percentage. For this demo, we're going to focus on Allura Red, which is spec 1570. So I'm going to click on it here and go see what we actually have in the specification. Under the general data, you can see that we have the product name, the description, the CAS number, and a synonym for the product. But for compliance checking, this is important. This is where you store your regulations, application area, and positive negative statements, which are pass-fail statements for compliance checking. These are for exclusion constraints, restrictive constraints, which carry value limits, and mandatory constraints. You'll always have in either of those areas, you'll always have a regulation application area and positive negative statement. You probably noticed that there was no data for the Allura Red spec under the properties. So what we're going to do is trigger the data load from the 3E Ariel Content Delivery Cloud. To do that, we're going to call up a function, secondary data determination. And this brings up a list, and we have a lot of them in our demo system. We're going to select the Ariel CDC, which is then going to launch a browser window into the delivery cloud, content delivery cloud. So you can see here we have the substance list, and that was simply the Allura Red spec that we selected from the SAP system. You can do multiple specs at a time. Just for demo purposes, we've selected one. And you can see there's filters up top, and below there's update mode, or ways to control what you want to do with the data when you run the compliance check. So just to talk about filters here, the system comes with a master filter. So you can see here, this will just give you an idea of the depth and breadth of data that's available out there on the Ariel cloud. Covers a number of industries: food, cosmetics, chem, application areas, just an abundant amount of information. And then you can toggle those on and off. And below there's the regions and countries that you want to select. So from this master list, you can see what you can pick from. And then you can create your own custom filters that are more targeted to how your business operates and the regions of the world within which you operate. So what we're going to do is run the Allura Red spec against the master filter. And we're going to use the decision support feature, which allows us to review the data before we would load any information back to the system. So you can see here that running Allura Red against the master filter has brought back 552 records. And just scrolling through, you can see all the countries it covers. Starts at Argentina, Brazil. We got codex information, covers all the regulations and regulatory agencies that publish data against this specification. So it just gives you an idea, of the robustness of the system and the data that's at your fingertips. So now what we'll do is we'll go back and we'll run the specification against the more targeted filter for confectionery. And we use the same decision support, and you can see now that the properties are down to 16, a much more manageable set of data for our demo business. At this point, you could choose to select them all and load all the data. For this demo, I'm just going to select just a couple of records. We'll do one for Brazil for hard and soft candies, and one for Indonesia. And then we can go up and click the save and load. Now, if you were doing multiple specifications, a lot of specs here, you may not want to do it that way. You can go in and it has a scheduling feature that you could schedule the loads on a different time schedule. So now with our data loaded from the Ariel cloud, we're just going to log out and return to SAP. We're going to click Edit to refresh the spec. Then we'll go into the properties, and you can see what we've done is stored the data in two different sort sequences, which means for the same field I can store multiple values. What differentiates it is the usage. You see I have public ID, which is Indonesia, and public BR, which is Brazil. And the limit value for Brazil is 0.03%, and the limit of Allura Red for Indonesia is 0.01%. So we're going to save this specification and then go back to our recipe. And you'll notice that Allura Red is quantity percentage is 0.6. So now let's run a compliance check against this recipe. You'll see here you could do start compliance check with variants, which are basically predefined checks. We're going to start a compliance check from the input screen just to show how you build one. So we have our input parameters here, and then what we're going to do is we're going to load a variant that we have set up. We have our confectionery Linx demo set up. This is going to take the data from that variant and then populate the compliance check input screen. You see our general settings show the data source, which is a recipe. Validity area is the world. When we choose our constraints, here we're checking only against the composition. And our parameters for constraint, the application area is confectionery. And then we're focusing in on Brazil regulation, and well as the usage constraint within Brazil as well. So then we run the compliance check, and we take a look at the results. It returns the spec, which is 1570. Our system is set up to show the cast number, though you can use the description as well. The constraint type is restricted, and it shows 0.6, which is the component quantity, and we go back, that's what is actually in our recipe. The actual constraint is 0.03, so we have an overrun of 20%, so that's pretty significant. And you can see down below we have the text for the compliance statement. And with any of these results, you can either print them or save them. So this is compliance checking in recipe development, leveraging third-party data like that of Ariel's content delivery cloud. Again, just a small example. On the larger scale, what it does is push that compliance intelligence further up into product development, and it allows companies to go to market not only faster but smarter. So that's it for this episode of PLMin10. If you have questions, feedback, topic suggestions, send them to watchit@plmin10.com. Check us out at PLMin10 on Twitter, or visit Linx-AS.com.